Hello there, it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we all know what that means. Another riveting live stream episode of Behind Breaking Bond. Introduce yourself, please.
First of all, I'm actually shocked that I'm actually back. I thought for sure that I'd be replaced by now. I guess not, so I'm still under my court-ordered sentence. Andy Kahan, Director of Victim Services, Victim Advocacy, Crime Stoppers of Houston. It's good to be here.
And as you all know, because you're watching this and you care about this particular situation for more than a year now, we've been reporting on the revolving door at the criminal courthouse, criminal district court judges giving repeat violent offenders multiple bonds and setting them free, and they go out and allegedly commit more crimes. Joining me is Andrea Bell. Introduce yourself, Andrea.
I'm Andrea Bell, B-E-A-L-L, and I'm a judicial candidate for the 185th District Court in the Democratic primary runoff that's happening right now in Harris County.
What made you decide to run, Andrea?
Well, I saw what was happening in the 185th in particular. The backlog was huge. The 185th judge had presided over the lowest number of trials of any of the 23 district courts. Well, at the time there were 22 district courts when I just decided to run, and people just weren't getting access to justice.
And that's one of the reasons that we have this big backlog, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
We did a report, I want to say back in the middle of April. Judge Jason Long was the subject of a motion for recusal. It was kind of some disturbing things came out in this public document, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah. And the document, I think, has been shared on multiple of the news outlets.
And one of the issues with that document, when you read it, it really calls into question Judge Luong's ability to be impartial, particularly in cases involving child sex crimes.
Yes, and we can't have somebody on the bench who isn't willing to follow the law, but we also need to make sure that those accused of crimes, as well as victims, get a fair day in court, and that's what was at issue in this case.
And one of the things that the document talked about was Judge Luong believed that the gentleman that the jury found guilty, he thought that that man was basically innocent, and that's kind of where the whole thing came from. And then there was some kind of disturbing things that were said. He compared those kind of crimes to a Salem witch trial. I mean, some really kind of disturbing things.
You don't normally hear a judge make these kind of, comments like that are essentially negative, and especially when 12 people of the community, take their time out of their schedule and do their civic duty and hear the evidence and make a decision based on the evidence. And now you've got a judge that's questioning 12 people who represent the community as well.
That is very rare, isn't it, to see a situation like that?
It is, and that's because judges need to, when they're presiding over a trial, call balls and strikes. That's the judge's role, to make sure that the parties are abiding by the law, the rules of evidence, and making sure that the jury only hears admissible evidence.
You spent a lot of time on those kind of cases, child sex crime cases. You said something earlier that was really interesting. More often than not, instead of lying, a child is more likely not to even report the crime.
Yes. So I prosecuted cases where children under 14 have been sexually abused. Earlier in my career, I haven't been doing that for a couple of years now. Now I do cases where children have been murdered. But earlier in my career, when I was prosecuting those cases, we studied the statistics on those cases because we were working with so many great organizations we have here in Harris County, like the Children's Assessment Center, which is a great resource, as well as the Houston Area Women's Center. And statistically, a child is more likely to never disclose and hold that inside and carry it with them for the rest of their lives than they are to make a false accusation of sexual abuse.
The primary was very interesting because, and again, I think it's because people out there like the people watching this live stream and that watch the ongoing series Breaking Bond, you're worried about this. You feel like this needs to stop, that this is increasing crime. This doesn't have anything to do about being a Republican or a Democrat. It comes down to what judges are doing. Judges some of them, many of them, allowing these repeat violent offenders to go out time and time again to commit more crimes. There were several incumbent judges that lost in the primary: Amy Martin, Greg Glass, Abigail Anastasio, Judge Long, and there's two women that are trying to replace Judge Greg Glass in the 208th. How important is it in an election like this, if someone really strongly believes in a candidate, that they go vote?
It's extremely important, and anybody can vote in the Democratic primary runoff as long as they did not vote in the Republican primary this past March.
That's an important point.
Yes.
So for example, if I did not vote, period, in the primary in March, I can vote in the runoff.
Yes, and we've had extremely low turnout this time around, so it's very important that if you care about what's happening in the criminal justice system, you come out to vote.
And I mean, this is one of those elections where somebody theoretically could win just based on a few votes.
Yes, we just need one vote over 50%. That's what I'm hoping
And you
for.
were actually pretty close during the primary.
I got almost 45% of the vote, and I was the second female on the ballot.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, I've been in the streets introducing myself to voters, and I have a platform that people really understand and can get behind. Increasing access to justice through the increase of trials, making sure we have somebody who's sitting on the bench who will care about defendants' rights, victims' rights, and our taxpayers. Doing a hard job, but an efficient job for Harris County. And also, another thing I want to do is create a program for 17 to 25-year-olds who are in probation, where it's more of a age-appropriate, individualized path out of the system, because we're already putting so many resources into this age group, and our Harris County probation system does everything they can with the tools they have, but this is our largest recidivist group. So when we take a chance on somebody, making sure that the resources are tailored to that person to rehabilitate that person and keep them out of the system, which will also save money, taxpayer dollars.
That is a really, that age group right there, 17 to 25, it's like, you're still kind of a teenager and you're still kind of making stupid decisions.
Right.
And I mean, you're at that point in your life where somebody can get you out of the system and kind of get you on the right track.
Right, and it's our largest recidivist group. So we need to meet a 17-year-old where that person is. And if we're going to take a chance on that person, make sure that the chance actually helps that person.
So what would you do as a judge with that group?
So for that group, when they are good candidates for probation, we would pair them with a mentor. And I've already been meeting with community leaders, with different nonprofits around Harris County, making sure they have a mentor that's going to be stable in their lives for 3 years, that can increase that 17-year-old social capital. And when I say that, what I mean is advocate for that person at job interviews. Make sure that they know how to do a job interview, how to put a resume together. Put educational assessments in the hands of these 17-year-olds to make sure that we can get all of these people on their way to a degree, whether that's a GED, a high school diploma, or looking at colleges.
I did a story last Friday with some misdemeanor judges, and they've got this they had a program where a lot of times, if you get deferred probation and you successfully complete it, it's still there. Like, if someone wanted to see if you qualify for an apartment or a job, they can see that. Right. And they had this great program where if you take part in it, you can basically get that removed. Law enforcement could still see it, but if somebody wanted to just run a background check because of a job or something like that, that offense, that deferred probation is not going to come up. And that's going to help a lot of people, I think.
It will help a lot of people, and it's great that our misdemeanor judges have been working very hard towards that.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with the program that they have. And again, there's no doubt that there are people that you can get them on the right track. You can get them out of the system. But I mean, I'm sorry, but if you've been charged 12 times with aggravated robbery and you've been to prison a couple of times, I mean, what's the likelihood?
Right. And it's also about making sure that we have someone who can balance our rehabilitative efforts with a community safety concern. And
that's something that judges have to consider when they make decisions. what's good for public safety.
It is, and that's one of the most difficult parts of the job, I believe.
Why are you so excited about maybe being a judge?
I really want to see the system work in Harris County. I have looked into the eyes of people who are affected by this backlog, who ask weekly, monthly, when is it going to be my turn? And having to answer that question with, I don't know, it depends on the judge, is just very difficult and heartbreaking in some situations. And we have so many hardworking Democratic judges on the bench right now that are doing everything they can, but that's why I'm running for the 185th, is to make sure that that bench is operating properly.
Yeah, and in all fairness, we had Hurricane Harvey that destroyed the courthouse. Then we had a pandemic. I mean, there are reasons that we got in the situation that we're in, but still, I mean, now we could be holding court, and to just have court, to have 2 or 3 trials in a year, that's ridiculous.
Absolutely. And even looking at 2019, the 185th judge presided over, I think it was 3 trials that year. And our other Democratic judges were presiding over anywhere from 2 to 5 times that amount in 2019, even with the pandemic, and all of the judges were dealing with the same restraints.
I mean, that's a big difference.
Yes.
It's time to get back on track. I mean,
Yeah.
so the Houston Chronicle endorsed your opponent.
Yes.
And the Chronicle, and I'll just read you, it kind of struck me as a little bit kind of odd that they have this comment here, particularly on that story that we discussed where Judge Long vehemently disagreed with that jury, and he made no bones about it. He didn't believe, the child. He believed that the person convicted of him was innocent. And the Chronicle, in their statement right here, it says here, certainly has areas he can improve. We were concerned last month to learn that his comments after a sex abuse trial raised questions about his impartiality. He called the defendant's 25-year sentence excessive. Prosecutors moved to remove him. And so basically it says, based on the little that is known about the incident, we still aren't going to change our decision. And I'm going, based on the little.
The document is very. I mean,
I thought it was a lot.
Yes,
it was not. It wasn't like it was just a little tidbit of information.
It was very detailed. Very detailed. I mean, it was. I mean,
so I just thought it was interesting in their endorsement that they would mention that, and then also throw in little is known. I'm going, no, there's a lot known.
Yeah, obviously they didn't read that document because there was a lot there.
Well, the Chronicle did an article on it, I believe, April 20th, where they did talk about the recusal and what was in the recusal. So it was shocking to me. But.
Yeah, that, without getting into great detail, it was very detailed. There was a lot of specific, it had like exhibits to it, right? I mean, it's been a while since I looked at it, but there was a lot there. Sure. I mean, this was not just somebody sat down and threw this together in 15 minutes. It was very thorough.
Sure. And when there is a recusal of a judge, when a recusal motion is filed from either side, the judge can either contest the recusal and say, no, I think I can still handle this case, or they can agree to step down off the case, which we've seen some judges do, even when they think that they could be fair, just to for appearances, say, if this is going to be a concern later, I don't want there to be any question about the fairness of the process, which is very, I think, brave and honorable of them. But in some cases, a judge can contest the recusal, which is well within their rights, but then an impartial judge comes and listens to the evidence in the recusal and determines whether or not that judge can be fair and impartial in the case or needs to be removed from the case.
And the decision was that he needed to be removed.
Yes.
I mean, how many recusal requests? I mean, I've been doing this a while. You have. I mean, I can't really recall. Maybe I can count them on my one hand, chop off a few fingers.
I can remember.
It's pretty rare.
It is.
Yeah, that it happens.
I can remember where, what you were saying, where a judge, something might come up where, Judge so-and-so knows so-and-so real well, and it'll be like
before the
trial. Right, yeah, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to step down.
Right, but not after a jury.
I've never, in my 32-year career, that's the first time I ever did a story on a judge questioning a sentence handed down by a jury.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The person that was sentenced got what, 25 years?
Yes, that
Okay,
was.
now they can appeal that, right? Or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
because it's in
So
the trial.
there is a process that they can appeal
Right,
the
Yes.
conviction.
yes,
Without having a judge step in and say this was wrong.
Right, well, and part of that is the motion for new trial,
yeah,
and which was filed, which triggers the need to
right.
have the parties say, do we need to file a recusal or not?
Because I mean, wouldn't you agree that it's very unusual for a judge after a jury reaches a verdict to say, oh, well, I think that's wrong?
Yes, that is very unusual.
I mean, that's not what the judge is there for.
Right, the judge is there to make sure that it's a fair process and that the parties did their jobs and that the jury only heard the admissible evidence and is only being charged with the relevant law.
Right. I mean, in a way, you're kind of the overseer of the trial.
Right.
I mean, you're this impartial overseer, and if the defense does something wrong or says something wrong, or the prosecution does, you step in and.
Yes, and the jury is the fact finder.
Right, right. So once the jury says, hey, this is our decision, as a judge, you should be out of it.
That's correct.
Did you ever have anybody complain about one of your stories and ask to be stricken?
Many people. But no, I mean, it's one of those things where the whole system is based on a jury of your peers.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's who's deciding that's deciding my fate.
Right.
Is the jury. The judge isn't.
Not only
Wow.
that, but you have a victim now that has to, again.
Go
not
through the
only
whole
go
thing
through
again.
the whole- And now, even after they bravely take and testify and do what we ask victims to do, and then all of a sudden, when you think, yes, I'm vindicated, I told the truth, the jury believed me, and then all of a sudden, you get put right back on the news again. That's just not fair for the victim.
Right.
Well, and I think part of what we need is people who have experience with these serious crimes as well. I'm the only person in this race that's litigated capital murders. I've tried multiple capital murders, tried all of these sexual abuse cases, aggravated robbery, murder. I have the most experience litigating violent first degree offenses. And that's something that we clearly need on the bench.
And capital murder, that's got to be one of the most difficult, because you know going in that if there's a conviction, it's going to be this appeal process. So you have to kind of, right, you want to know from the get-go that everything's kosher and everything's going the way it's supposed to.
Absolutely. There's this saying with trial attorneys that I'm in sales, not warranties. Joking about the appellate process, but when I handle cases, I'm so concerned about having to put the family through testifying again through another trial that I'm worried about that.
I've been with families that have gone through repeat capital cases.
That would just be terrible.
It's devastating.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's why we need to make sure that we have judges on the bench that are fair and that know the law and will ensure that the parties follow it so that it lowers the risk of an appeal.
I do want to point out real quickly that I've repeatedly asked Judge Jason Wong to do an interview. I called his court today asking him to do an interview for tonight's breaking bond. Haven't heard back yet, but I do want to say we really appreciate you coming in and talking to us. This is the second time you've done it. And that's the thing too, the candidates, almost all of the candidates this time around, they wanted to come in here, and I mean, you've gotten an opportunity to kind of let everybody out there know where you stand and why you're running and kind of what you stand for.
Yes, well, and I'm very passionate about this, and I hope everybody will turn out to vote. Again, early voting is through Friday.
And again, this is one of those elections where just a handful of votes could be the deciding factor. So if you really want to see the revolving door at the criminal courthouse come to an end, be sure to vote. Early voting is going on now through Friday, correct?
Yes.
And then election day is next Tuesday. So please, please, please vote.
Yep, do your civic duty.
Before we go, the hand talkers are not going to sit at the camera table anymore. Keep doing that.
Give us a piano.
I know, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Facebook user Annette says we need more people like you, Andrea Val.
Oh, thank you so much, Annette. I hope you will go vote and spread the word to your family and friends.
And where should if people want to go, you got to play a website or something?
Yes.
Tell them about that.
www.andreaBEALL4judge.com.
Facebook user Philip says, and I would imagine he's talking about the judges, is soft on crime. That is the problem.
Well, the problem, it's not really so much being soft on crime. It's a lack of common sense, if you ask me, in my own personal opinion. If someone is repeatedly appearing before you and you have a new violent criminal charge, why do you get another bond? It's like we've said it many, many times for years. There would be maybe a few instances where somebody might be out on 2 or 3 bonds. I mean,
There were very few.
right. But I mean, come on. I mean, we've come across instances 7, 8, 12, 14, right?
How many
Makes
stories have we done?
more than I count.
And all on the basis of the one premise of the subject.
Right. And look at it this way too. Anything else, if my boss said, okay, I want you to do an ongoing series where every week you're going to do a story on this particular subject matter, part of me would be like, I'd be freaking out. Well, what if I can't find anything? There's no problem. I mean, there are some
shortage.
Right. I mean, there are some Tuesdays. It's like we got 2 or 3 possibilities, and the reason is because it happens so frequently. And how many people are we at?
172 that have been allegedly killed by defendants on multiple felony bonds, felony PR bonds, and/or bond forfeitures, and the majority of the 172 have occurred since 2020.
And please keep in mind this: you do not have to believe me. You don't have to believe him. Every single one of them is documented. All of these breaking bond reports are based on court documents. It's information that anybody can go get, can go look at. And that's another thing too that I think it's important to point out. We've been doing this for more than a year. I've never had a judge call me up and say, you were wrong about that. That defendant is not out on 10 bonds. I did not grant bond 12 times. Not one judge has ever done that because they know that there's proof. There's proof that they did. I mean, it's in black and white.
Let's just put it this way. If Randy Wallace can access the court documents, anybody out there can do the same.
Any 12-year-old can do this job. No, seriously. I mean, this is an important issue. I mean, it's important to my station, Fox 26. It's been an important issue to Crime Stoppers, and
more importantly, it's been an important issue for victims' families.
Yes, I mean, we're really talking, yeah, and keep in mind too, we say 172, what we know of. That doesn't count all the people that maybe got their car stolen, or maybe got sexually attacked or robbed at gunpoint by a defendant who's walking around because they're out on multiple felony bonds. And keep in mind too, there for a while, it was not even money, PR bonds. Yep. We saw that a lot at the get-go, where it was just at a PR bond. Let's face it, it's a get out of jail free card. You don't have to put up any money.
Well,
Facebook, oh, I'm sorry.
No, and I was just going to say, and part of the issue is being intentional when we're looking at bonds, because we don't want the other problem either, where we have a bunch of people being held at cash bonds for nonviolent offenses.
Right, yeah.
Because that doesn't help anybody. And so making sure that those people are out, and when PR bonds are appropriate or low bonds are appropriate, and making sure that people who are charged with violent offenses are held accountable to their bond.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Andrew, because keep in mind too, that all we've looked at is for a defendant to be featured on breaking bond, they have to have a criminal history.
Correct.
And they have to be out on more than one felony bond. And the crime that they're accused of committing is a violent crime. Because you're right, Ed. I mean, no one should sit in jail for a theft, anything that's non-violent. I mean, that's not how the system should work. But when on paper you can see that defendant Randy Wallace is creating an issue because he's been arrested 8 times for aggravated robbery. And the judge, how does the judge got to realize, well, when I let you out, you're going to go do the same thing again. And that's what we see on paper. One of the most interesting things too, when you look at some of these defendants, there'll be like a gap of time, right? There'll be like a 2-year period or 3-year period. And you start looking at it real close, it's because they were in prison. And one of the things too that State Senator John Whitmire has said many times, our prisons are basically empty. Harris County probably sends more defendants to Texas prisons than any other county, right?
Yeah, easily over 25%.
Right, and we're not sending criminals to prison. They're basically all out on bond.
A Facebook user, Annette, says she's a victim of a murdered brother that's waiting for justice.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yes. If it's a situation where the accused was out on multiple bonds, go to my Facebook page and send me a message, okay? Because I want to hear from you. And that's something else too. We've repeatedly pointed out. If I got bond for murder, but I don't have any criminal history, I mean, I just got bond for murder, that's not a breaking bond report,
No,
is it?
we've never done a story.
If we did a story on people that were out on bond for murder, it'd be
We've
thousands.
never done a story on a guy charged with murder who was on 1 felony bond.
Right.
Well, and constitutionally, those
Yes.
people aren't even eligible to be held at no bond. So they're entitled to a bond.
Right.
And a bond that has to
And
be
that's
set
an
in those
issue that
cases.
will probably be brought up
But-
again next legislative session.
Yeah, the thing, Andrea, that
Yeah.
I've never understood with this is these judges because with capital murder, you could say you don't get a bond,
Mhm.
right? You can hold somebody for capital murder with no bond.
You can, however, only after a hearing where the state is required to put on evidence and the rules of evidence apply. So we can't just put a police officer on the stand and say, here's what the report said. We have to bring in actual witnesses to the offense to show that this person more than likely will be found guilty of the offense.
Because the thing that I don't understand about it is, I mean, the defendant's facing the possibility of life in prison or death.
Right.
So you got to figure that some defendants are going to think, I'm not going to go back to court.
Right. Well, and it's always going to be, which is why we need judges that are intentional, and we have some, right? But we need a judge to be intentional about looking at each case individually with the history, how much the person can make, what the risk is to the community, and how strong the state's case is can be one of the factors that judges consider for the case law. But there are multiple factors that are listed, not only in the code, but through case law that judges should consider and must consider. And that's why there has to be a lot of intentionality when it comes to setting bonds.
And you've got to look at the public safety.
Yes, absolutely.
And yeah, and you just brought this up. I mean, I'm not picking on every single judge. There's a lot of good judges down there. And being a judge would be very difficult. I would have a clue how to be a judge. This whole thing, again, after reporting for 3 decades in this town, I never saw this until 2018, 2019, somewhere in that range.
2019 it started.
Right, and it just took off. And I'm sorry, but on the surface, it doesn't make sense. And the Constitution has been the same. Judges in the past, they wouldn't put up with some of this stuff, right? It would be like, no, I mean, I gave you a bond, you violated the bond. Every single person that's out on bond, if you get a criminal charge, if you are accused of breaking the law, you violated your bond, right?
Yep, and the numbers speak for themselves. Harris County Sheriff's Department released numbers yesterday showing that the amount of homicides so far in 2022 has doubled since 2019. And of course, we know within the city of Houston limits, it's over 70% since 2019. So it's there, it's happening, and we have to realize it and deal with it and stop throwing stones. But we got to get a grip on this issue.
Right. I mean, crime affects everybody. Anybody can be a victim of crime, no matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or what. It can affect anybody and everybody. And we don't want to live in a city where you feel like you can't, you're always looking around, or you think that something bad's going to happen. But we have a problem right now and I'm talking about a small segment when you look at the entire population, but there's a small segment of criminals that they're basically being told that you can go out and commit a crime and you're going to get another bond. So that's what they do. And that's what needs to stop. I mean, it's driving crime. The DA came on, what was it? And during the legislative session.
Time is up, ladies and gentlemen, and it's associated with bail.
Right. And we've heard many people, many leaders in the city, Mayor Turner, for example, I never will forget last summer. And it was a situation where somebody was out on like 12 bonds, and the mayor stood there and said, no one should be out on 6, 7, 8 bonds. It just doesn't make common sense.
Now, in closing, applause to you for putting your neck out and running. It takes a lot of courage to do that. So I just want to thank you for standing up for the people of Harris County and putting yourself out there. It's not an easy thing to do.
And something else too that I want to say, and Andrew, you have this is the second time you're very upfront. You'll sit here and answer any stupid question I ask. But no, you know what you're doing, you know your stuff, and we wish you the best.
Thank you. Thanks. Please go vote.
Yes.
Best to you.
Before we go, there is two things. Facebook user Sherry wants to know if there's a mail or a phone number to contact about someone that is a multiple offender out on bond once again.
Yeah, if there's a particular defendant that you're concerned about, again, go to Facebook and direct message me. My Facebook is Randy Wallace, Fox 26. Direct message me. Give me the defendant's name. If you know the date of birth, just what you know, and we'll take a look and we'll see. But, some folks have reached out to me, and unfortunately, some of the situations don't merit a breaking bond. Again, someone that's charged with murder, they're entitled to a bond, just like anybody else is. And if it's one bond and it's murder, then, I mean, I could understand from a victim standpoint, you think, my loved one's dead, and there's that goofball walking around free. But, you have to let the system play out, and that's the way that it is. I mean, that person's not convicted of the murder, and if they don't have a bunch of bonds and a lengthy criminal history, then we just can't really do a breaking bond report.
No, can't do.
And I don't know if you guys can answer this or not, but Facebook Hyson asks, can we get confirmation? Some judges are blaming the DA for special hearings regarding the issue of bonds. Is that true? Not true?
That I've heard this over and over and over again, and this is what I don't understand about it, because I can't really give you a clear, concise answer. I go back to before there were judges that apparently they didn't feel that there had to be a hearing. This is what happened. Judges started blaming the DA's office. The prosecutors are not following through on the hearings. But I've talked to people at the DA's office, and if I tried to legally explain it, I would be wrong. But there are people over there high up in the DA's office that I believe, and they're saying what these judges are claiming is not correct. Now, I can't tell you legally why that is, but the thing that you always have to go back to is why now? There are judges that are more activist, right? Wouldn't you agree with that? There's
That's a different mindset.
Right,
more than anything.
right.
Yeah.
And who was it that we talked to? The judge, I can't
The
remember
new
her
one?
name. Antu.
Yeah, 482nd. Yeah.
She joined us one time, and she made the best kind of scenario or remark. She said, I'm not a judge to make social change. I'm going to run a courtroom and I'm going to be the judge. She feels that that's not the place for social change. There's sort of an attitude within Harris County and some people in the criminal justice system that the system is broken and we need to fix it. Well, the system, of course, is not perfect, but I don't know how you break something until you've got this real clear idea of, okay, this is what we're going to build back up, or this is how it's going to work. But there are people in the criminal justice system that, and you tell me if this is not correct, that don't think that we should even have prisons.
That is factually correct.
No, I don't get that. I've said it a million times. I think, and maybe I'm naive, but I think the majority of people walking around are good, honest people, that they're not going to hurt a person or an animal or anybody else. But then there's a segment of society that they live in the criminal element, they choose to live in the criminal element, and they're not going to leave the criminal element. What are you going to do with those people? That's why you have prisons.
And again, I just go back to the numbers. The numbers speak for themselves, and the numbers of particularly violent offenses, especially murder, the numbers have basically doubled, if not even more, in the last few years. And that's all I fall back on.
Right. And again, it's not something that I yanked out of my head. It's all documented. It's all.
You would much rather be doing puppy stories.
Oh, yes, yes.
I would much rather hear about a puppy.
Right, really? See? Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And be sure to go out and vote. Early voting continues through Friday. If you can't make it out, go Tuesday. But make your voice heard. You have the power to change this, so vote. And be sure to watch tonight's Breaking Bond on the 9 p.m. newscast.
And two other people agree with Andy. Thank you for running.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Andrea.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
See ya.